Hey everybody. So put out the poll. First one, obviously, that I got most of the likes and had to do with, or most of the votes that had to do with the Egyptian destinations, which we did last week. The second most was the European destinations, and that's what I'm gonna kind of touch on today. And for those that kind of read the description on uh, the European destinations I was going to cover, uh, I'm not going to talk about the ones where a lot of Westerners choose to go, which is London, Paris, and Rome, because I feel that there's so much more to Europe than just that. We go to those because it's easy to get to, a lot of flights, and those are the most populated cities. But with the most populated cities and lots of tourists, you run into the overcrowding. You deal with a lot of almost like what I would call tourist inflation. They know the tourists are going to come there. They want to make memories. So your local vendors, they're going to be able to jack up the price. And a lot of times, you're not even getting stuff that's locally made. You're going to get, if you're looking for souvenirs, you're going to get the same um, junk that you can get from any tchotchke store here in the U.S. So it's I definitely like to recommend that people visit what you would almost consider off the beaten path locations. Um, so, as always, start with my value proposition. As your travel advisor, I'm never going to charge you a fee. I enjoy what I do. I love being able to plan trips for people, throw out different options to see what works for you, works for your situation. But in doing all of that, I will never charge you a dime. Not I get paid by the vendors. Put a post out yesterday. How do I make money as a travel advisor if I'm not charging any fees? I make the money through the vendors. Um, and so there's no need for me to take away from your vacation when you could use that money to upgrade your experience. I'm able to find rates online uh, through a bunch of booking engines that my agency has, and in doing that, I'm able to find rates that are often or almost always better than what you're going to find through Expedia. And if we're booking them, you know, there's some hotels where we have to go through them direct. In doing that, I'm going to be able to get you benefits that you wouldn't be able to get at that hotel unless you were a common guest at their brand. So that's another reason to book with me is, not only am I getting you rates that are better than what you're going to see, but I'm getting you benefits. I'm your advocate because you might go to a hotel one time, and when you're done, you're never going to come back, and the hotel knows that. But what they also know is that by you going through a travel advisor such as myself, then it's not just you they need to make happy, it's me that they need to make happy as well. And because they want to make sure that I'm putting guests there in the future, so it is in their interest to make you happy, because if you come back to me angry, then I'm going to go back to them angry, and it's not good for them, because my ultimate goal is to make sure that you have a good and value added experience in your travels through my services. And one of the other things that I really want to emphasize, I think kind of gets lost over, because you've got travel teams, you've got trade shows, family reunions, those sorts of things, where you have groups of people. If you're doing something on a cruise where you're going to have lots of rooms, make sure you go through me as your travel advisor, because I'm able to get on a cruise, get extra amenities, get the staterooms booked with refundable deposits and extra little things added that you wouldn't get if you try to do all this on your own. And when it comes to hotels, I'm typically going to get at least 20% better than what's the best available rate online that you're going to see. And I'm also, again, going to be negotiating that some little added bonuses get added to all of your stays. So once again, remember that I'm your travel advisor for for group bookings as well, not just one-off rooms or a couple of staterooms on a cruise. So with all that being said, let me kind of jump into the European destinations. So I want to say hi to Meg, who I can see is on. Thank you for joining. So I've been to 20 countries in Europe, which, when you look at it, is almost 43% of the entire continent of Europe. Uh, Obviously, I've missed a lot of the micronations like Liechtenstein, San Marino, Andorra, but I've gotten a lot of the big ones, and I will eventually make my way through some of the others. I'm not saying that it makes me an expert, but I am saying that um, having had this experience and having had lived in Europe, um, I have a little bit different perspective on what it means to travel through Europe, and that's what I want to share with you, my friends, family, my clients. Uh, is that it is a fantastic experience, and you really want to be able to immerse yourself into the local culture to actually see what it means to live and socialize with the locals. They come here and they do it with us. We need to reciprocate that. And anybody that knows me obviously knows the very first place I'm going to talk about is Finland. Finland is my happy place. Um, I was having some trouble last year. As a matter of fact, I think it was 1 year ago this week that I was in Helsinki. And I got there, and taking the train from the airport into the city, I have my face hurt from smiling. I hadn't even gotten into the city yet, but it is a place that brings me such joy that I I couldn't quit smiling. I sat and I went to a coffee shop. They make the the famous candy that they have in Finland is called futsa, and there was a cafe that was built in the late 1800s. And I sat underneath an umbrella in the rain, drinking a coffee, having a pastry, and I didn't care because it's the place that makes me happy. And I'm able to tell you the places that when you go to Helsinki, these are the places that you need to go to. Obviously, the big landmark within Helsinki is the Helsinki Cathedral, which is in Senate Square. Big, beautiful, white Lutheran church. You can see it from the cruise ships as you pull into the harbor for Helsinki. But you also have the Church of the Rock. It was a church built in the 60s. And what happened is two brothers basically carved and blasted this thing out of solid granite, because that's what Helsinki is built on, is solid granite. And they left it, the walls and everything are completely unfinished, because by changing it, they would change the acoustics. And the acoustics in this church are so great that they have over 400 concerts within this church a year. So think about it. There's only 365 days. They got mass, they got church services, and they're still finding time to have over 400 concerts inside of this church. It is a beautiful place to go see. Another one is there's an island fortress. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Finns call it Suomenlinna. It was built by the Swedes, because for those that don't necessarily know Finnish history, Finland was a part of Sweden up until the 1800s, when it became a part of Russia. But the Swedes built this fortress to protect the Swedish kingdom from Peter the Great and the Russian Navy. And then come to find out, once there was a war between Sweden and Russia, that fortress actually went over to the Russians. So the Swedes, in essence, ultimately built it for their use. And that's just another place in Helsinki. But another thing, and when I got ready to move to Finland, it's a place I didn't know anything about. I'd never heard of it. But it's the Lapland area of Finland, and you actually have Lapland region in Norway and Sweden as well. But specifically Rovaniemi, it's a city in Lapland where people will frequently go to see the Northern Lights. I've been twice, unfortunately. Haven't seen the Northern Lights. It's dependent upon a few things: the strength of the aurora borealis, as well as what your cloud cover going to be like. So that's all going to dictate how much of the northern lights you get to see. So the um, one of the other things to do up there is if it's considered the home of Santa Claus. Now, Santa Claus, it's great when you're kids, but they actually have it where it's good for adults too. You have reindeer sleigh rides, you have dog sled rides, and there's a couple of places. There's Santa Park, Santa Land, and you can go and there's things that you can do to kind of really immerse. I keep saying immerse. It's immerse. You immerse yourself in the Santa and Christmas culture. I've done multiple videos on Christmas markets. Now, this is the real Christmas feel is being able to go to the home of Santa Claus. One of the cool places, it's actually an old fallout shelter from the Cold War, and it was repurposed to become Santa's workshop. So you're able to walk underneath the Arctic Circle. You get a certificate saying that you walked under the Arctic Circle. You have the Ice Princess, and you have all these ice sculptures that you can go in and see. You meet with Santa, the elf workshop. There's all sorts of things, but it's something to occupy your time. And then, like I said, there's so many other things to go and do in Rovaniemi. But one of the things, if you are a museum person, definitely go to the Arctic Museum. It is such a fascinating place that it talks about the Sami people who are the natives of Finland. They wear very bright clothes, and you get a good experience on them, but also just sort of what was life like, and then also what was it like in World War II. Finland was in a very difficult situation in World War II because they hated the communists, they hated the Soviet Union, because remember they had lived underneath Russian rule, and when it was Alexander II, they liked it. Once Alexander II passed, then it started to go downhill, and they knew that they did not want to live underneath communist rule. So they had to choose: were they going to ally themselves with the German nationalist, or were they going to ally themselves with the communist? So it was a lose-lose situation. They ended up allying themselves with the German nationalist, and in doing so, they had to destroy a train depot, destroy a bridge. They underestimated the amount of explosives used and ended up destroying 90% of the city, which has ultimately been rebuilt. But it is a good place to. But if you are going to go in the wintertime, make sure you got some traction on your shoes, some spikes, something, because you are going to slip and slide all over the place because they don't plow, they don't shovel the sidewalks because it does snow so much and it's cold for so long. They just let it compact down and they walk on it. So if you're not used to walking on ice or snow, definitely recommend that. And since you're in the area of Finland, if you're back down in Helsinki, what you can do is you take a 2 hour ferry ride across the Gulf of Finland and the Baltic Sea over to Estonia, and the capital there is Tallinn. I was only in Tallinn for about a day and a half, but it's one of the best preserved medieval cities in all of Europe, and is almost annually considered one of the best Christmas markets in all of Europe. And for those interested in the end of the Cold War, they had one of the peaceful revolutions in the fall of communism where you ended up with, I think it was 300,000 people in a park, and they basically sang for their freedom from communist rule. And keep in mind, Estonia is right up against Russia, the former Soviet Union. So it was really powerful that you had this many people come out in a peaceful musical protest to separate themselves from the USSR. One of the places, if you go to Tallinn, obviously the Russian Orthodox Church is beautiful, but there's a restaurant there called Old Hansa, and definitely recommend going to this place. The building that it's in goes back to the 1400s. I do not remember seeing a single light bulb in the entire place. It is all candlelit, and they will open up the shutters to let natural light come in. But the menu has been crafted by the chef using recipes that go back to the medieval times. You are, it's bear, boar, elk, and then different ways of doing grains. Some of the best bread I've ever had in my life. It's not the loaves of bread like we think. It's basically they took the dough, you throw it in the oven, it comes out, and it's the just the big mass of bread, and it was just fantastic. So definitely a place to consider if you are in the Nordic region, going to Tallinn and Estonia. Once again, another place that I think is very underrated for people to visit when they go to Europe. Um, if you head south from there, you're going to end up in Poland. On the northern part of Poland, on the Baltic Sea, you have a city called Gdansk. When it was controlled by the Germans after the Blitzkrieg in 39, they changed the name to Danzig. And when you look at the train station, you'll still see Danzig on the train station, but the city is called Gdansk. It's a very easy walking city. My train, when I was there, didn't leave until afternoon. I walked and walked, and it was just so much to see and do in this city. And I'm just like, I've got to come back. And uh, definitely recommend if you are headed in that direction, you could probably even start your trip in Gdansk. They have an airport you can fly into, but you take the train down. You can go through Warsaw and go down into to Krakow. Now, a lot of people know of Krakow. If you watch Schindler's List, the Steven Spielberg movie back in the 90s, that was one of the big ghettos that was built by the Germans to place the Polish Jewish population. Now, Krakow is a city that was basically unscathed during the war. Fascinatingly enough, because we know that World War II started in Poland, they quickly surrendered to the Germans. And even when the Soviets invaded Poland to push the Germans out, it still was not destroyed by the Germans on the retreat. So a lot of what you're going to see in Krakow is original to how it was for hundreds of years. Whereas if you go to Warsaw, there's still some of the old stuff there, but a lot of it is the brutalist look that you got from the Soviet architecture. So depending on where you are in Warsaw, you're going to see what was original and what has been rebuilt. Whereas in Krakow, it's mainly all authentic to what it was like in Poland for, um, hundreds of years. Uh, going from, and if you are in Auschwitz, um, I definitely recommend, or go to, if you're in Krakow, I definitely recommend going to Auschwitz. Um, it's a very humbling experience. We all know what happened there, but it is very difficult emotionally. And we've seen videos, we've seen movies and pictures. There's nothing that we can see printed that actually puts into perspective what took place in Auschwitz or how big it is. Um, Standing in the guard tower, if everybody going back to Schindler's List, where the train came through and you see the guard tower that's overlooking the entire camp, it is impossible to get the camp into a single photo. It is just how massive it is. It was spread out for, acres. When it fell in January of 1945, they were actually in the process of expanding it to be able to put more people in there. So it is not easily emotionally, but you know, Auschwitz itself was made a museum in 1947 by the prisoners who were freed during the liberation, and they wanted it built because they did not want people to forget what actually took place. So if we don't go and we don't visit um, Auschwitz, then we aren't really taking in everything that happened during that time. Next place to visit is, I'll call it former Yugoslavia. It is the Balkan region of Europe. Now, I think a lot of people in the U.S. knew that there was a big war going on in the Balkans in the 90s. We know that there was genocide. We know that there was, it was not a good situation at all. And keeping in mind that we were only 50 years removed from the end of World War II, that this was happening. Um, but I don't think we really understood what was taking place. The three big places to visit. I mean, you can go to Slovenia. Slovenia is not. Yugoslavia believed in the right to self determination, which basically meant that if the people of the country felt they should be free, you should be a free country. And since like 90 something percent of the population of Slovenia are ethnic Slovenes, there was no issue with them being free. Now, where this all became uh, a cause for tension in that area in not World War II, but in the 90s, was that what we now know as Croatia, okay, 25% of Croatia were Serbs. Now, let me step back a second and kind of get into the geopolitical nuances of the Balkans. If somebody is from Croatia, they are called a Croatian. If somebody is from Bosnia, they are called a Bosnian. And if somebody is from Serbia, they are called a Serbian. That's how Americans view nationality. We view it as the IANs, if you will. But in the Balkan regions, the people there don't so much view themselves by their nationality as they do their ethnicity. Now, you also have Croats. Now, we would think if somebody's a Croat, they're from Croatia, but that's not the case. A Croat is a Roman Catholic from the Balkan region. A Bosniak is a Muslim from the Balkan region, and a Serb is an Eastern Orthodox from the Balkan region. So it was possible to have a Bosnian Croat. So you had a Roman Catholic from Bosnia. Their allegiance was to being Roman Catholic, not being Bosnian. So when Yugoslavia was one big country after before World War II, all the way up into the 90s, uh, they went by their ethnicity, and that's how they saw themselves. But once Yugoslavia fell, that's when the war started, because Serbia wanted everybody to stay as a part of Yugoslavia. 25% of Croatia were Serbs, so you had a lot of fighting. And the first part of the war, the Bosniaks and the Croats were fighting together against the Serbs, and then there was a year of peace. And then the Croats and the Bosniaks started fighting each other. And it really came to a head in the city of Mostar. There was a river that flows through it. On one side was the Bosniaks, and the other side is the Croats. Now, if you're going to go to the Balkans, you've got to go to Mostar. It is it has a beautiful bridge that was destroyed in the war, and it was rebuilt using 80% of the original material. They actually opened up the quarry where the original stone came from in the 1500s to get new material to rebuild this bridge. It is a beautiful bridge. It is a beautiful, dark, like aqua river that runs underneath it. And you are in the middle of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And on one side of that river were the Croats, the other side were the Bosniaks, and they were fighting each other across this very narrow river. And you walk through the city, and you can still see pockmarks in the building from the urban street fighting that was taking place. You still have buildings that were shelled out from the 90s that are still standing for you to walk through and see. So it's a fascinating place to visit. I definitely recommend going to Bosnia and Herzegovina, specifically Mostar. Sarajevo is another cool place to go. But coming back to Croatia, which is right along the ocean, beautiful. Possibly the most beautiful coastline I have ever seen in my life. And you have two cities that are quite large. You have Split and Dubrovnik. Americans are going to know them as being places where they filmed Game of Thrones. Split has an area that was what they call Diocletian's palace. Diocletian was a Roman emperor. He persecuted the Christians, but his palace is still there. and you still have the limestone blocks and everything that make up the street, and they're polished, and it's beautiful. Get a tour guide when you're there. There are so many little things to pick up on that you're not going to notice, just like any other place you visit. I had a very, very good tour guide there. I will put her information in the chat. But she was phenomenal in showing me all the little things. Like one thing is you no longer have the gates going into the palace that would drop down if there was an invasion, but you still have the slits where the gate would go. If you were to just walk through this gate now, you wouldn't think anything of it. But if you look up, you can see the recess where this gate would retract. Those sorts of things. The fact that the church in Diocletian's palace was actually built on top of Diocletian's temple, which is ironic because he did persecute Christians, and then they ended up building their church on top of his house. So there's that, and then the other thing you want to do is go to Dubrovnik. Dubrovnik has these ancient, or not ancient, but they go back to like the 1500s. And Dubrovnik was a city-state that was basically a double agent for the Ottomans and the Venetians. And they had nothing to offer except for being a spy for two different empires. And that's how they survived. They were giving Ottoman information to the Venetians and the Venetian information to the Ottomans. But it is beautiful for those that watch Game of Thrones. I do not watch it. King's Landing is actually in Dubrovnik. When you go and you walk around the fortress walls of Dubrovnik, you will see bright orange houses or bright orange roofs. These are new roofs that were replaced after the Balkan Wars because they were bombed during the beginning stages of this war. That's really what brought a lot of the interest of the world into it, was that the Yugoslav youth was bombing a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So those are things that you're going to see, and it is just, like I said, it is a beautiful city. The food is good. The people are fantastic. If you love gelato, apparently they do, because I must have seen 25 gelato shops within the city walls of Dubrovnik. But I went from Dubrovnik and I actually flew to Belgrade, and I had a fantastic tour guide there. I can drop his information in the chat too because we are actually friends on Facebook. But he was phenomenal. He's such a good tour guide that one of the princes of Saudi Arabia came to visit Belgrade, and the Serbian government asked him to be the tour guide. That's how good this guy was. Okay. And I'll put his information in the chat if you're going to Belgrade to be able to contact. But the fascinating thing about this trip was being able to see these beautiful cities of Central and Eastern Europe when all we want to do is look at London, Rome, and Paris. It was, with the exception of Dubrovnik maybe, it was a whole lot cheaper being in this region, but also getting the history lesson and seeing the beautiful cultures that are there. You walk around Belgrade and you see two alphabets. You see the Cyrillic alphabet, which is what everybody thinks of as the Russian alphabet, but you also have the English, sort of what we see as an English type alphabet. Obviously, it's not English, it's in Serbian, but you see that on all your street corners, all the street signs. I even have a picture of Starbucks and then Starbucks written in the Cyrillic alphabet. So it was fascinating in being able to get the perspective of a Bosniak, a Croat, and a Serb in what took place in this war in the 90s. So it was one of the things that really intrigued me, and I would love to go back because I was only in the Balkans for 3 days, and it's not enough time to be able to do the Balkans. The last place that I want to touch on is another one I've talked about before, is Czechia. We used to call it the Czech Republic, and at the end of the Cold War, it was Czechoslovakia, and Slovakia and Czechia split into two nations. They're not happy about the split because they had been together for so long and they're almost ethnically tied together, it didn't make any sense for them to be two different nations. It was an amicable split. There was no divisiveness, no anger like you see when a lot of countries split apart. It wasn't the case. But Czechia, in my mind, possibly one of the most beautiful countries in Europe, if not the world. Um, Obviously, everybody's going to start in Prague. Prague is the city of 100 spires. You have these beautiful um, peaks, and there's just these tall, like just spears on top of all these buildings when you look out over the rooftops of the city. You have the one of the oldest, or it was the biggest castle that is still standing in Europe there, and within that is one of the bigger cathedrals within Europe. You have all of that in Prague. Prague is uh, the metro system works really well there. You can take the trams, and I recommend the tram because it allows you to see so much of the city. You see something you want to do, you stop, you hit the button, you get off at the next stop, and then you go see what you want to see, and then you can get back on the tram to go where you need to go. About 2 hour ride from Prague is the city of Český Krumlov. Český Krumlov was the old Bohemian capital, South Bohemian capital. It seriously looks like something out of a fairy tale. There were mills that were in Český Krumlov, and you could see why the water's not real deep, so it flows kind of quick. And you could put the wheels there to run the mills to grind wheat and those sorts of things that would be grown in the area. But you walk through, and it looks like a fairy tale walking through this town. You go at Christmas, a cute little Christmas market, handmade goods, and you have this castle that was started to be built around the 1200s, and it's painted in such a fashion that it looks like it's made out of stone. You look like you have these large stones that are in place, but it's actually just the way that they are painted to make it look that way. And then finally, the last city that I think is a must see if you go to Czechia is about an hour drive from Prague, and it's Kutná Hora. Kutná Hora is another UNESCO site, has three unique churches there. I talked about these in a video a couple of weeks ago. I cannot remember the name. One of them is the interior is decorated with bones that were excavated from the graveyard. They have taken those bones, similar to what they've done with the catacombs of Paris, and done the inside of this church. Maverick wasn't a fan, but it was really neat, and they're putting a lot of work into making sure that the bones are preserved so that they don't deteriorate, because bones exposed to air are going to go away. Bones that are buried under the ground typically will last longer. Then you have St. Barbara's, which it's a unique looking church in the fact that it was built over such a long period of time. It has different architectural styles to it, going back from Gothic, Neo-Gothic, Renaissance, and you see that in the church. Beautiful stained glass windows. Until I went to Kokum this past summer, it was the most beautiful stained glass windows I had ever seen. Well, if you don't count Saint-Chapelle in Paris. Saint-Chapelle, hands down, the most beautiful stained glass windows in the world. But St. Barbara's is beautiful. And then there's another church, and the name, honestly, it escapes me, but it is the one that is actually inscribed as UNESCO because you have the relics of two monks there. They were, in fact, martyrs because the church was burnt, and their bodies were within. It was burnt because they were going to kill the monks. So that's about a day trip. You get out there, and the city is spread out because it was built on silver mines, but you can definitely do and see some things. Recommend, once again, getting a tour guide. If you can get a private tour, I think it's going to be best, because we were in a situation where we had a tour guide who was speaking French, Spanish, and English to our group. So if you can get a private guide to be able to take you through all this, probably going to get more out of it. Not to say that we didn't, but it was the effort was spread out across a lot of people. Um, so if anybody has any questions about these destinations, I'd be happy to answer them. Um, and once I finish this up, I'm going to go ahead and send out an invite for the next one for what I'm going to do next week. Um, Actually came to me in church today, uh, but I've been to a lot of sites that are either mentioned in the Bible or have biblical significance. So I'm going to talk about those. It's not going to be anything in Jerusalem, anything in Israel. I have not been to there, so I can't necessarily speak to my experience there. But what I can do or talk about places that I went to in Jordan, in Egypt, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. There are some places. I want everybody to consider attending the one next week. I will find the time here shortly, and I'll send out the invites. But I think it'll be quite fascinating because I think it's, once again, everybody focuses on going to Jerusalem. They don't think about the other places that are in the area as places to visit. Um, so I hope everybody kind of got something away from this, that there are places to go in Europe that are fascinating. They are cheaper. You can still get there. There are international ports of entry. Like if you go to Helsinki, you can get there from about 5 or 6 airports in the U.S., including DFW. You get to Helsinki, then you can take the ferry or plane to Tallinn. Uh, Croatia, there are seasonal flights on United to Croatia. And then once you get there, you can drive to Bosnia. I drove from Croatia to Bosnia and then back into Croatia. Poland, Lot Airlines, they fly into Chicago, JFK, and I believe Washington. And then Czechia, they have international flights as well that'll put you into Prague. And if you are going to fly British Airways, Lufthansa, or Air France, uh, once you get into London, Paris, Amsterdam, then it's an easy connection into any of these places. It'll be just like flying within the U.S. So I hope everybody, like I said, takes something away from this. Uh, any feedback, any comments, something you would like me to cover in the future, please drop that in the chat, send me a message. I'd love to hear from you, see if anybody's taking anything away from this. Uh, but until next Sunday, I'll do some more of these minute and a half reel videos that I've been dropping in just to kind of keep everybody engaged and hopefully stimulate a little more interest in the travel, because as I also put in a post this week, we're not guaranteed tomorrow. You're not guaranteed, oh, hey, I'll do it next summer or I'll do it the next time you go. You need to take advantage of the opportunity that's in front of you because, as we know from my personal experience, next time might not get here. So um, don't don't pass up a chance to make memories if you have the opportunity right now. So until next time, like I said, everybody go ahead and drop in your comments, and I will talk to everybody next week. Take care.